What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another quick tip video. And in today's video, we're going to be going into a specific topic about MIDI composition and composing in general if you work in a DAW, and that is about templates. So let's talk about templates, what they are, what they help with, maybe some downsides to them, and then my personal approach to every project that I write. So let's get started. So what is a template? Well, a template is like a pre-built set of tracks that you design in order to get yourself composing very quickly. Okay, so the basically every composer or producer has the ability to load up a certain amount of tracks with instruments already loaded on those tracks, and then what you can do is actually save those tracks in a certain order to be loaded at a moment's notice whenever you start to work on something new. So for example, if I'm working on a sci-fi score, for example, and I know that this movie is going to have a ton of these scores in it, then it might be a good idea to pull up the instruments that you think you'll be using over and over again, save those instruments as kind of like a default loading to basically load automatically, and every time you open the project, and so that way when it opens up, you're ready to go and you don't have to search around for instruments and all that. So it definitely saves a lot of time, and that's what I wrote down in the last part. One of the main benefits of having a template is that it saves time, and that's very important when you're composing on the clock. So let's continue. What are some benefits of a template? Well, we just talked about how it saves a lot of time. It lets us write without having to wait for instruments to load, whereas if we're working without a template and we're choosing individual instruments to load in, it could take quite a long time for instruments to load completely before writing. And we already talked about, if you write in a particular style, you know exactly what to expect every time. So if I'm writing that sci-fi score and I have a synth patch that I love, I don't have to pull it up every single time and create that from scratch if I have a template. The template can already have that patch set, that patch and those settings for that patch loaded in. So when I open up the project, I can just write and it sounds exactly as I, adjusted it previously. And then another benefit is that you can pre-balance it. So you can balance it and, add in plugins and all that stuff. Any like technical jargon you want to use, to basically customize your template as best as possible to your workflow, you have the ability to do that and save yourself time if you're going to keep working with that type of sound in mind in the future. So that's a big benefit there. Let's talk about a couple of downsides of using a template. So the first one is that you may be boxed into a particular sound, and using that sci-fi example, let's say you're writing for that sci-fi film, which is great and all, but if you load in that template every single time, then you might find that all of those tracks will sound very, very similar. If you don't switch tracks out and experiment with different sounds, all of your music for that film might sound a little bit generic in terms of that style, and you might find yourself kind of running out of gas just because it's like the same thing over and over again. Whereas if you don't have a template, then you can kind of experiment with new sounds and instruments just by loading in things that pop into your mind. And that's what I think is one of the big benefits of not having a template. Another technical aspect is that it takes time to reorganize. If you're trying to switch tracks around and you want to color group them differently and all that stuff, it does take time to customize it to your own needs. Whereas if you don't have a template and you're just starting from scratch, then you can just do stuff at a moment's notice and get it right the first time without having to tweak, and do it, all that stuff. So now, knowing both the pros and the cons of a template, what do I do? Well, I'm in the camp of no template. And the reason is because I like to start 100% fresh every time I start a new project. And even though, if you know my music, a lot of my music is in the cinematic orchestral vein, and it's inspired by Disney and Nintendo music, I like to have the ability to be like, I think of it like a painter and a canvas. I have basically infinite color choices on my board that I can use my paintbrush and paint on the canvas. I'm not stuck with just like red, blue, green, and yellow, for example. I have a billion of like color options, and I can choose whichever one I want to start with and then continue to build from there. So as I'm a very visual learner, this is how I personally operate, and I like to have the ability and the choice to, put in whatever I want, whenever I want. So that's kind of the, my approach there. So I just said, no template equals absolute freedom. And I personally like the ability to pick and choose. So hopefully that makes sense. And that's kind of like my personal approach. But of course, there are composers who swear by templates, especially composers who are working on huge projects. And if they're working for a certain film, like I said, or a certain project where a certain cohesive sound is needed, in a particular style, then a template is definitely a good idea to get yourself in the ballpark. And then you can always switch instruments out and load new stuff in as needed. So that's a big time saver there. But for like smaller projects and more indie artists who are not really locked into a particular sound, not having a template frees you up from being influenced by your current template. So I think that's a really cool thing to have, the opportunity to just choose whatever you want. So yeah, I hope that made sense. Thank you so much for watching. That is my take on the template. And if you have any questions, again, please leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.